Well, welcome back this week to another analysis behind the news. This week I'm going to talk about treason. You know, back in the mid-60s to the mid-70s, there were two pocketbooks which showed up on the scene, which were written in league with members of the John Birch Society, or actually written by members of the John Birch Society, and circulated in the millions. And they were called None Dare Call It Treason, and the other, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. Now, you very rarely have a treasonous act performed without it involving some sort of a conspiracy, be it a couple of people or be it a very large conspiracy in nature when this treason is performed. Now, just what is treason? Now, the Constitution of the United States defines treason thus: treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Well, what if no war is actually declared? What if it's called a war, but it really isn't a war because the Congress of the United States has not declared it? Maybe it's a war that's sanctioned under the United Nations. Then what is treasonous? You know, we had a Vietnam War. We had a lot of people giving aid to the enemy. We had whole organizations in the United States. One of them I can think of just off the top of my head was sending blood to North Vietnam to help them during that war, but not helping our troops. They were in the streets against our troops, against the war in Vietnam, etc. These individuals formed other terrorist organizations. You know, you have a number of people that are against the war, and then a smaller group that will actually demonstrate against the war, and then another group within that, and within that, and within that, that boils down into more and more extreme conditions, more extreme thoughts, more extreme actions, and they become terrorists. So out of millions, it may boil down to several thousand or several hundred or whatever it happens to be. And many of these people committed acts of terror inside the United States and were involved in treasonous activities. It wasn't unusual for me to get into schools and speak in classrooms during the Vietnam War, and in some cases I would see classes where they had pictures of Ho Chi Minh and Mao Zedong and others up on the walls teaching treason to the students in high school and college. But it was never called treason because, well, it wasn't politically correct. It was free speech. What do you do with that when you're really at war, but you're not at war because it hasn't been declared by Congress? And so we had a lot of people committing acts of treason, and that's what led to the books themselves. None dare call it treason. Because when it proliferates, when it's widespread, nobody wants to label it treason. They want to label it free speech. And we've come to that juncture again in our country where we have treason. People are involved in treason, and nobody wants to say that's what it is. Nobody wants to say that word. When have you ever heard any congressman, any pundit, any newsman ever issue that word in regard to some of the actions of people in our country and the things that they do? The thing is that we had a lot of people during the Vietnam War, as I described, that were involved in terrorism, were involved in treason. Interestingly enough, many of these leaders were the mentors of the man we now have in the White House, President Barack Obama. And I've said before, the man is a communist. I don't care how you describe that, the man is a communist. Or I've never seen one. If he's not a communist, then communism has never existed. Everything the man does serves two purposes: to either tear down the society of the United States or tear down the United States military. Just like this thing they did on Friday, to open up all combat positions to women. My word. That could be a whole hour's dissertation on the disaster that will produce within the United States military. I could spend a lot of time on it, but it will not do anything for our fighting ability or anything else. You know, the John Birch Society years ago published an article saying they want to draft your daughters. And that was published in the 1970s, and now it's coming true. They're already talking about revising the selective service laws to include women as a result of this new ruling. So to me, that's treason against the women of our country, against our wives, our daughters, our granddaughters. But the point where I'm going with all of this is that there's two things that I believe are treasonous going on right now that are kind of off the radar of people from the standpoint of it being treason. From the standpoint of it being an issue, that's one thing. But calling it what it is something that I think is very necessary. Here's an article by Kimberly Strassel out of last Friday's Wall Street Journal. And it's a very important article. You should go and look it up. It says, Justice's Liberal Slush Fund. And, you know, I don't always agree with this columnist, but in this case, she's got it very well done. She's nailed it, in other words. And she's talking about the fact that the Justice Department is taking money or forcing money to be used from legal cases against corporations and individuals and making them give money or transferring that money to community action organizations. And these community action organizations then are causing problems in the streets. They're causing problems at the voting booth. They're causing problems in many ways for Congress and working against the very things that Congress does not want to do and forcing Congress to vote certain ways or congressmen to vote certain ways. And this is being done by the Department of Justice. And some of these funds are going into organizations that promote La Raza, for instance, where they claim that the whole Southwest belongs to Mexico and it should be given back. Now, if that's not treason, I've never heard of it. I don't understand the word treason if that's not treason of demanding that we return or put all of New Mexico and Arizona and California and Utah and et cetera, Texas, et cetera, and give it to Mexico. Is that not treason? And yet the Justice Department is helping fund that sort of thing. And lastly, because we're running out of time, I want to address your attention to the preamble to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. And the preamble alone states things that are just simply outrageous. For instance, the last sentence in the preamble says this: expand their partnership by encouraging the accession of other states or separate customs territories in order to further enhance regional economic integration, and to create the foundation of a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. Now, what they're already saying to us is that the TPP is going to block China. That's its main purpose. We've got to block China besides the trade and the jobs and everything else. And the TPP will do it. And yet the very last sentence in the preamble says that they're going to help create the free trade area of the Asia Pacific, which includes China, will include Russia. And so they lie to us on one hand and tell us the truth in something very few people ever pick up and read. But here's something else that's even a little bit more insidious. In the last, this is right out of the thing. So it's the last sentence on the first page. It says, recognize further their inherent right to adopt, maintain, or modify health care systems. This, if you extrapolate this out, draw out the lines, connect the dots, you'll realize that what they're saying is that the TPP will give the TPP Commission control over Obamacare, over whether our Congress modifies it, adheres to it, or repeals it, or anything else. Those sorts of decisions will be taken out of Congress if we adhere to this new agreement that they're trying to get us to adopt. So it not only is involved in creating something much bigger and community and integrating the Pacific into one economic bloc, it is taking power away from the Congress to not only have say-so over commerce, but over health care as well. If that's not treason, I guess I don't understand the term in the real sense of it. Until next week, we'll see you then.